Hey everyone, today's lesson is lesson 99 and we're reviewing fraction, decimal, and percent equivalents. And this is definitely not the first time we've seen this, but this is one of those things in math that just continues to come up and up and up really for the rest of your life. And it's one of those things that it's just really good to kind of keep revisiting because if we don't, we come across problems like this, whether in math class or in real life, and we're like, oh, shoot, I don't know if I remember how to do that. So it's just going to be a good quick review on how to look at fractions, decimals, and percents. And if we know one, can we find the other? And the answer is always absolutely yes. And this is one of those things in math, you guys, where everyone's going to kind of think about it differently, and there's no right way to solve these. So, my brain just happens to work really well, kind of thinking about things as a fraction and going from there. I'm going to kind of model that way today just because that's what comes to my brain. That's kind of what comes naturally. But if your brain works really well in decimals or in percents, go that route. There's no really right way to do this. If you find a way that works for you, that's the right way. So let's scroll down, take a look at our learning target for today. Really just, we have one task, and it's just to complete a table that shows equivalent fractions, decimals, and percents. That's on the next slide. There literally aren't even any examples that go along with this lesson, but I'm going to pull up that slide and together we'll kind of work through how to solve the missing boxes. So here we go. So here, it just says complete the table. Really, this is it. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at is right here, this fraction of 1/2. Now, I wish they would have given us a little bit of a harder one because, of course, 1/2 is one that we know. It's probably the most common fraction, decimal, percent equivalent that we've ever practiced from early on. We know what the answers are for these, but I'll kind of go through the why, just in case some of you are curious. It's good to always ask why. So the fraction is 1/2. The decimal that goes along with that, let's see if I can get the stylus to work, of course, is 0.5. I can't get my points to work. I don't really know why. Well, that's going to have to do for now. 0.5. I'll talk through that just kind of in a second. And then the percent that goes along with 1/2 is 50%. Yikes, I got to work on these little dots. Okay, sorry about that. It's hard to write with this fat stylus tip. Okay, so my brain works best in fractions. So when I'm looking at this fraction of 1/2, if I just write that over here, when I first start to consider what decimal is this, I start thinking about this first spot, this first decimal place past the decimal is the tenths place. And in working with these, it's a lot about how you say the numbers. If you can say them the correct way, you can write them any way that you want them to look. So as I'm looking at this, I know with fractions, one place past the decimal, as I'm looking to create a decimal number, one place past the decimal is the tenths place. Well, there's also tenths in fractions. So basically over here, whether I do it physically on paper or I just do it mentally in my head, I'm going to create a proportion, meaning I have my fraction here of 1/2 that I was given, and I'm considering what is that going to look like with a base of tenths, because that's what my decimal is. It's 5/10. I need tenths. So going back over here, 2 times what is going to give me 10 on the bottom? Well, of course, that's 5. And whatever I do on the bottom, I'm going to do on top. I'm running out of space here. 1 times, that's supposed to be a 5. 1 times 5 is going to give me 5/10. Now, they're not asking for another fraction. I need to figure out how to write that in decimal form. And of course, this is how you do that. 0.5 is read correctly as 5/10. That's where that came from. Now, I'm thinking about a percent. Those of you that work well with just shifting your decimal or just thinking in decimal numbers, you know that you can literally just bump your decimal 2 spots. But I'm just going to revert back to the fraction piece. If you happen to work well with fractions like I do, we can kind of create a proportion like we did for our decimal number. So if I have my fraction originally of 1/2 and I need to figure out what percent that is, I go back to just my base understanding of, I know percents are always out of 100. Anytime I see the word percents, I think about the number 100. That's always what I do. And so again, we have a proportion. 2 times what is going to give me 100? Well, 2 times 50 will. And same thing on top. If I do it on bottom, I'll do it to my numerator. 1 times 50 gives me 50 hundredths. Now remember, they're not asking for another fraction. I have to think, well, 50 hundredths, how do I write that as a percent? That would really look like a decimal. 50 hundredths would look like 0.50. 50 over 100, you could also just consider, well, anything over 100 is that percent. 50 hundredths is 50%. That was a really big, long explanation. Some of you probably didn't need that. I'll go a little faster through the other ones. Let's take a look here. For our next line, we have a decimal of 3 tenths. 3 tenths. Well, if you can read that decimal number correctly without saying 0.3, if you can read 3 tenths, well, guess what? You've got your fraction done. Yikes. 3 tenths. 3 tenths right there. The first thing I'm going to consider is looking at that fraction. Can I reduce it at all? 3 is a prime number. No, you can't. 3 tenths it is, just like that. And then jumping ahead over here to the percent. What percent is that? Well, a couple ways to think about this. Some of you who think in terms of just shifting your decimal, you can take your decimal number here. Oh, I don't know what I just did. You can take your decimal number here and just bump your decimal 2 times for the 2 zeros in 100, and all of a sudden you have 30%. For those of you who are a little bit like me and you like to think about fractions, we can look over here, create a proportion. 3 tenths would look like what over 100? Well, 10 times 10 gives me 100. 3 times 10 gives me 30. Any number over 100 is that as a percent right here. So we've got 30%. I'm going to kind of use the information that I just did in that middle line to help me kind of fill in that bottom line of 40%. Look at the similarities. Math, good mathematicians look for patterns. Math is hard enough. You want to find patterns, tricks, ways to shorten the load for your brain. So 40% right here. We're given the 40%. Well, look at the similarity. Look at the line right above it is 30%. If 30% looks like 0.3 or 3 tenths, guess what? 40% is going to look really similar. We've got 4 tenths. Oh, does not want to let me create a decimal number or a decimal point. So we have 0.4 or 4 tenths. Now, if we can read that number correctly, our fraction is done, 4 tenths. However, I'm not going to fill it into the box because I know 4 tenths can be reduced. That's not our final fractional answer. 4 tenths can be reduced to 2 fifths. Yikes. 2 fifths will be our fractional answer. That is all of the practice that I have for you today. This is just a really good thing for you to practice doing. Percents, decimals, fractions, these kinds of things come up a lot in real life for all sorts of reasons, especially with percents. I think about shopping. We can all relate to having to calculate like the percent off of something and what that would be. These are just really good math skills to have kind of locked down. So again, I have a really short homework assignment for you, a 5-problem practice for you to practice these very specific skills on, transferring back and forth between these different things. It's right here in Google Classroom. You can submit it via Google Forms or a hard paper copy. Thanks so much. Have a great day. See if I can end my video faster than I did last time.